São Paulo, 1928. An abandoned suitcase in the middle of Estação da Luz. A stench so unbearable it made the station workers recoil. And inside it, horror. Newspapers splashed headlines no one could believe. Dismembered body found inside a suitcase. Authorities were in shock, the public in panic. Within hours, the entire city knew the suspect's name. A once respected man, now accused of a crime that defied comprehension. Who was he? Why did he do it? And above all, who was the woman whose remains were found inside that suitcase? The suitcase crime became a national obsession. Photographs, reenactments, rumors, none of it was enough to satisfy the curiosity and fear that gripped the streets. It marked the birth of a new era in crime journalism, fueled by blood and public fascination. A crime so brutal it transcended time and still echoes today as the first great scandal of Brazil's old republic. São Paulo in 1928 was a feverish cauldron of ambition and sweat, a magnet for waves of European immigrants who arrived in South America chasing the promise of prosperity. The city pulsed as the beating heart of Brazil's coffee-driven economy, a cosmopolitan hub where Italian was often heard in the streets, mingling with dialects and the local Portuguese. It wasn't pure Italian, but rather a blend of blends, a linguistic patchwork that reflected the diversity of the immigrant community. For American readers, the scene might evoke, on a smaller scale, the vibrancy of immigrant neighborhoods in New York's Lower East Side or Chicago in the early 20th century. Places where the American dream, or in this case, the Brazilian one, collided with the harsh realities of labor and adaptation. It was within this backdrop of industrial hope and financial hardship that a love story unfolded, one that would swiftly twist into a grotesque nightmare, shaking public opinion and making headlines across Brazil and beyond. This event would forever be remembered as the Trunk Murder. The story began innocently enough in 1925 aboard a ship crossing the Atlantic from Italy to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Among the passengers were Giuseppe Pistone, a 31-year-old Italian immigrant, and Maria Mercedes Fea, a 20-year-old young woman. They met during the voyage and, in a twist of fate, discovered they had both been born in the same town, Canelli, in northern Italy. The ship became the stage for the blossoming of a romance that, on the surface, seemed tender and genuine. Giuseppe, who was supporting himself in Argentina with a rapidly dwindling inheritance, began courting Maria Fea, who was traveling to visit her mother and siblings who had emigrated from Italy to Argentina years earlier. Yet the facade of the charming gentleman soon began to crack, revealing the opportunist underneath. Giuseppe, whom the police would later describe as a malandro, a local term for a sly, street-smart hustler who lives off petty schemes and illicit activities, akin to a small-time con artist, had no real inheritance to speak of, nor any legitimate source of income. He squandered what little money he had on trips and luxuries. After disembarking in Buenos Aires, Maria Fea and Pistone parted ways as 1926 gave way to 1927. Maria went to live with her family, while Pistone headed to Mar del Plata, where, according to police records, he was arrested for fraud. The seed of his deceitful nature had already been planted. Despite his questionable past and the fierce opposition of Maria's family, especially her sister, who made every possible attempt to stop the union, the romance was rekindled. When Maria turned 21, defying her family's wishes and seeking the sense of security she believed she would find at Pistone's side, the two married in Buenos Aires in February 1928. To celebrate, the couple embarked on a honeymoon voyage back to Italy aboard the majestic ship Conte Biancamano. 4 months later, they returned to Argentina. Maria Fea was 1 month pregnant. The prospect of a new life inspired them to seek a new horizon, and in August 1928, they decided to emigrate to São Paulo. The journey was anything but easy. In addition to the long sea crossing, they faced an exhausting 14-hour train ride before finally reaching the city. Upon arriving at the Hospedaria de Imigrantes, a Brazilian institution created to welcome and temporarily house newcomers, serving as a screening and support center similar to Ellis Island, though more focused on integrating immigrants into rural or urban labor, Pistone immediately sought out his cousin, Francesco Pistone, who owned a wine and salami business, a thriving niche within the Italian community. Francesco, seeing promise in the growth of his enterprise, offered Giuseppe a partnership. That moment lit the fuse for Pistone's criminal plan. Giuseppe had no capital to invest in the business. To conceal this, he devised an elaborate lie. He claimed he was about to receive an inheritance from his late father in Italy, amounting to 150,000 liras, roughly equivalent to 150 contos de reis. For American readers, the conto de reis was the Brazilian monetary unit at the time. 150,000 liras was a considerable sum, a meaningful amount of capital by the standards of the immigrant community. Pistone sent a telegram to his mother, Marcellina Baiari, in Italy, requesting the money. When she refused, his elaborate facade began to crumble. Yet Pistone didn't back down. Instead, he accepted Francesco's business offer with a hidden agenda, to swindle his cousin later. Unaware of any deceit and eager to help, Francesco found Giuseppe a job and assisted him in renting an apartment. The couple moved into apartment number 5 in a building at 34 Rua Conceição in downtown São Paulo, today known as Avenida Casper Libero in the Luz district. Their life there was described as withdrawn and mysterious, according to the landlords who sublet them the room. But the mask soon began to slip. Francesco started to doubt Giuseppe's story about the inheritance. Feeling trapped and desperate for money, Giuseppe pressured Maria to write a letter to his mother, pleading for the transfer of the liras. Maria, however, knew too much about her husband's true nature. In the days leading up to that moment, she had uncovered many improper things about him. In an act of both desperation and justice, Maria Fea wrote a letter to her mother-in-law. But the contents were not what Pistone had expected. It wasn't a plea for money, but a painful confession. Maria revealed that Pistone had lied to Francesco Pistone, that there was no inheritance waiting for him, and that she had spent 3,000 lire, part of the money they had brought from abroad, to pay off debts her husband had incurred. She confessed she was exhausted by Pistone's bad luck and whims. "I chose not to send the 150,000 lire my husband claimed came from an inheritance," Maria Fea wrote, according to investigators, "because I discovered he was lying to Mr. Francesco Pistone." She exposed her husband's fraud. The financial strain and growing frustration within the Pistone household had reached their peak. The couple had already been engaged in heated arguments, loud enough for their landlords to hear. Maria Citrangolo, the landlady of the apartment, would later recall hearing a heated argument between the couple a few days earlier. She even remembered hearing 2 muffled screams from a woman, but her husband, Ramiro Franco, reasoned that they shouldn't interfere. It was, after all, the 3rd time the couple had quarreled loudly. Thursday morning, October 4th, 1928, began like any other day in downtown São Paulo. Giuseppe Pistone left for work at Casa Canelli, his cousin's wine business. Around 11:30 a.m., he returned to the apartment on Rua da Conceição to pick up Maria for lunch, as was their daily routine. That was when Pistone discovered Maria Fea's letter, the irrefutable proof that his scheme had been exposed. According to the investigation led by Detective Carvalho Franco, the discovery of the fraud was the main trigger for the fatal confrontation. What followed was an explosion of immediate violence. Enraged and terrified that his plan had collapsed, Giuseppe confronted his wife, who was 6 months pregnant. Words turned into violence. Pistone grabbed her by the neck and strangled her with his bare hands. He would later confess, in a moment of apparent remorse, that he had spent the entire night with the blonde little head of his Mariuccia, a tender nickname used within the Italian community, and one shared by both him and the landlady, resting in his arms. Giuseppe tried to sell the police a different version of the crime, that he had arrived at the apartment to find his wife in bed with a lover, and that the murder had been a crime of passion sparked by adultery. According to his story, the supposed lover fled in haste, leaving Pistone and Maria alone. But this account was quickly debunked by the landlords. That Thursday afternoon, Maria Citrangolo had brought a glazier to the apartment to make a small repair, and the only person there was Maria Fea, quietly sitting and embroidering a handkerchief. She was not half-dressed, nor was there any lover in sight. Pistone's claim of adultery, an attempt to brand the victim with the stigma of infidelity, completely fell apart. Police Commissioner Carvalho Franco, who led the investigation in São Paulo, concluded that the death had occurred on the afternoon of October 4th. With Maria Fea lying dead on the floor, or perhaps on the bed, Giuseppe Pistone found himself trapped in a horrifying dilemma. The killer spent 3 full days in the apartment with his wife's body. This period exposed a chilling emotional barrenness. Pistone, a man who could only be described as sociopathic, tried to keep up appearances. He went to work as usual and returned each night to sleep in the same apartment where the corpse lay. In São Paulo's warm climate, the stench must have quickly become unbearable. The tension, too, must have been suffocating as he frantically searched for a solution. The body, already in an advanced state of decomposition, needed to be hidden. Pistone then began to devise what he believed would be the perfect crime. On Sunday, October 7, 1928, Pistone went to a store on Avenida São João in downtown São Paulo, where he purchased a large leather suitcase, described as a kind of trunk with an American lock and a length of strong rope. The shopkeeper, a newsstand owner, would later recognize both the suitcase and the rope, a crucial detail in the investigation. Back at the apartment, Pistone tried to fit Maria's body into the suitcase along with some of her clothes, 15 pairs of stockings, nightgowns, skirts, a hat, and a pillow. The body wouldn't fit. In a moment of calculated coldness and physical horror, Pistone grabbed the razor he carried with him. He decided to cut off his victim's legs at the knees. Sources are clear in stating that he didn't dismember the entire body, but merely severed the legs and broke the spine and neck so the corpse could fit into the trunk. The blade of the razor, he would later note, had snapped into a half-moon shape during the act. To mask the putrid smell coming from the decomposing body, Pistone sprinkled 2 boxes of Coty face powder over the corpse. That small detail, the packaging of a cosmetic product, along with other personal items, throat lozenges, a syringe, an extract, would later be found by the police. Once the gruesome packing was complete, Pistone left the building. He needed to get the body far from the capital. Giuseppe headed to Estação da Luz, the main railway station in São Paulo, comparable in historical and architectural significance to New York's Grand Central Terminal, where he purchased a ticket to Santos, the coastal port city of São Paulo. At Estação da Luz, he met a freight agent. Pistone spent the entire night in the station's hall, sitting on the suitcase that contained his wife's body. He was very well dressed and composed, something that drew everyone's attention. His constant vigilance was a blend of determination and selfishness, a display of chilling composure. The next morning, a station porter noticed that the suitcase was swarming with flies. He alerted Pistone, who, maintaining an unsettling calm, explained that the smell and the insects must have come from spoiled food. Pistone then had the suitcase loaded onto the train bound for Santos. The train route between São Paulo and Santos is famous for its steep descent, requiring special locomotives carrying passengers from the high plateau down to sea level. In Santos, Pistone hired a truck driver, or possibly a Fiat 818 car, to transport the luggage from the railway station, likely Valongo station, to the port. The driver, whom Pistone later paid generously, noticed that the suitcase smelled terrible. At the port, Pistone's focus was on shipping the suitcase out of the country. He provided a false name and address: Francesco Ferrero, Bordeaux, France. The chosen vessel was the Massilia, a passenger steamer bound for Europe. There, Pistone approached 3 Romanian passengers who were also boarding, offering them 10,000 reis, a generous tip at the time, though sources don't specify its purchasing power. He asked them to check in the suitcase on behalf of a friend. The Romanians later described him as a tall, blonde, well-dressed, and good-looking Italian. The killer kept his distance, calmly observing everything until the very last moment of the ship's departure. He needed to ensure that the body of Maria Fea, the pregnant woman he had murdered, would cross the ocean and vanish forever. Fate, however, intervened in the most brutal way. It was Sunday, October 7th, 1928, at the bustling port of Santos, a hub of feverish activity and international traffic. The suitcase, addressed to Bordeaux, was being hoisted aboard the Massilia. At that crucial moment, as the cargo was being handled, there was a minor jolt, perhaps a careless slip by one of the dock workers. The suitcase, already weakened by handling and swollen from decomposition, split open slightly at the bottom. That's when the truth began to leak out. A dark liquid seeped from the suitcase, and the stench, noticed earlier by the driver, became utterly unbearable. If that incident with the leaking suitcase and the realization of its unbearable smell hadn't occurred, investigators later remarked, it truly would have been the perfect crime. At approximately the same time the ship was lifting anchor, the Masilia's captain was alerted to the situation with the cargo. He ordered the suitcase to be brought back to the dock to be opened and inspected. What they found inside Warehouse 13 at the port of Santos when the suitcase was finally opened was pure horror. Inside lay the body of a young woman with fair skin and light hair cut in the a la garçon style, a short, fashionable haircut of the era, similar to the bob or flapper cut popular in the 1920s United States. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition. Her legs had been severed at the knees, and her spine and neck were broken so that the corpse could fit inside the suitcase. What most outraged the police and the press was the discovery that Maria Feia was pregnant. The autopsy, conducted quickly, revealed a post-mortem abortion of a 6-month-old female fetus. Maria Feia, affectionately known as Mariuccia, was the victim of this heinous crime. As the body was taken for forensic examination, the regional police chief of Santos, Ferreira de Rosa, took charge of the investigation. The police were at first completely at a loss, working with limited resources and relying on what could only be described as rudimentary investigative methods. In Brazil in 1928, the São Paulo Investigation Bureau, a kind of state-level criminal investigation department roughly comparable to a state crime division in the US, represented the most advanced arm of law enforcement at the time. The crime made headlines immediately, causing a nationwide sensation. The press was the era's main source of mass communication. There was no radio or television yet, and newspapers thrived on public fascination with such stories. In São Paulo, papers like Notícias Populares gave the case front-page coverage. It quickly became the talk of the town, discussed in cafes, restaurants, and during the traditional Italian family lunches on Sundays. The Italian community in particular was shaken to its core, as both the victim and the presumed killer came from their own circle. The investigation began with only a handful of clues, but they would prove crucial. The first major lead came from the suitcase itself, a luggage tag from the São Paulo-Rio Railway indicating that the trunk had arrived by train. This led investigators to the Valongo station in Santos. The second crucial clue was the suitcase itself. In less than 24 hours, the victim had been identified, and the murderer, Giuseppe Pistone, was quickly named as the prime suspect. Detective Ferreira de Rosa examined the suitcase. He learned from the Romanian passengers who had checked the luggage that they had done so on behalf of someone else. Police in Rio de Janeiro were immediately contacted. The Masilia was scheduled to stop there to detain and question the Romanians. When apprehended, the Romanians claimed innocence. They said they had merely done a favor for a tall, blonde, well-dressed Italian man who paid them 10,000 reis to ship the suitcase to a friend. After questioning, the officers concluded the Romanians were telling the truth and allowed them to continue their journey. The focus of the investigation shifted back to Santos and São Paulo. Ferreira de Rosa turned his attention to the railway tag. He soon located the truck driver who had transported the suitcase from the train station to the port. The driver described the man carrying the luggage as blonde, with light hair and blue eyes. The driver also mentioned someone who had advised Pistone to leave the suitcase in the baggage warehouse so it could be shipped the following day, providing instructions for its transport. Meanwhile, Pistone had already fled the port. He hired a car in José Bonifacio Square to take him back to São Paulo, promising 150,000 reis for the trip and another 50,000 for fuel. During a stop for a meal in São Bernardo, at the time a common rest point on long journeys and now part of Greater São Paulo, Pistone overheard from others that the police had uncovered everything. His face reportedly changed color, though the driver, Gil de Gloria, never suspected who he was transporting. While Pistone hid, the press, acting almost as an investigative arm, played a key role in solving the crime. The owner of a newspaper shop recognized both the suitcase and the rope, remembering that he had sold them. He brought one of his employees to the police, who provided the delivery address, 34 Rua da Conceição. Detective Ferreira da Rosa relayed all the details to Detective Carvalho Franco, the head of the investigation bureau in São Paulo. Carvalho Franco, who would be the equivalent of a lead detective in a homicide or special investigations unit in the United States, went straight to Rua da Conceição. Upon arriving at the apartment, he spoke with the landlords, Maria Citrangelo and Ramiro Franco. They confirmed that the Italian man had lived in apartment number 5 with his wife Maria Feia, or Mariucci as she was affectionately called, but that they had moved out just a few days earlier. The landlord added that the furniture had been sold and taken away by truck. Carvalho Franco asked to inspect the apartment. Inside, he noticed a dark stain on the floor. "Looks like blood, right here," he told his partner. The landlords were taken to the police station for questioning, where they were informed of the dreadful news. Mrs. Maria has been murdered, and all evidence points to her husband as the killer. At Luz Station, the detective interviewed the dispatcher and the porter who had handled the foul-smelling suitcase. They described Pistone, and their description perfectly matched that of the wanted man. Carvalho Franco obtained information about an acquaintance of Pistone named Perota, whose wife led the police to Pensão Grasso at 34 Avenida Ipiranga, where Pistone was hiding. According to reports, Pistone had planned to throw himself into the Tietê River, which runs through São Paulo, or into the sea at Santos, but lost his nerve. On October 9, 1928, less than 24 hours after the discovery of the body, Giuseppe Pistone was arrested at Pensão Grasso. He offered no resistance. Pistone was taken in for questioning by detectives Carvalho Franco and Ferreira da Rosa. His initial story quickly fell apart. The claim that he had found his wife half naked or that she had died suddenly was proven false. The testimony of Maria Citrangelo, the landlady, was crucial. She confirmed that she had seen Maria Feia alive on Thursday, October 4th, around 11 a.m., sitting and embroidering, completely contradicting Pistone's claim that he had caught her in adultery or that her death had occurred at another time. She also revealed that she had heard the violent argument. Until the very end, the killer tried to justify his actions, clinging to the claim that Maria had been unfaithful. Another version he gave to the police tied the crime to money. Maria had allegedly taken 3,000 lire, which were meant to pay Pistone's debts in Italy, from the 15,000 lire they had deposited in São Paulo, leading to a heated argument. However, the court focused primarily on the evidence of fraud against his cousin Francesco. Maria Feia's siblings, Esther and Jose Feia, traveled from Argentina to assist Brazilian authorities and help build a psychological profile of the killer. They confirmed that Pistone was a man of vile character, a staunch fascist. Giuseppe was an admirer of Mussolini, who had already been convicted of swindling in Argentina. On July 15, 1931, Giuseppe Pistone was tried and sentenced to 31 years in prison for homicide and concealment of a corpse. He served his sentence first at the state penitentiary in São Paulo and later at the agricultural prison in Taubaté in the interior of São Paulo state. Curiously, the Brazilian judicial system at the time allowed Pistone's sentence to be reduced. On June 13, 1944, his sentence was commuted to 20 years, thanks to a decree signed by then-President Getúlio Vargas, a central figure in Brazilian politics, often compared to Franklin D. Roosevelt in the United States for his strong, centralized leadership and populist reforms. Pistone was granted parole on August 3, 1944, after serving 16 years, and his sentence was officially declared completed on November 5, 1948. After his release, Pistone found work in Taubaté as a building custodian. In 1949, he remarried, a cleaning woman he had met while in prison. Years later, Pistone's stepson revealed that his stepfather had told him multiple, conflicting versions of the murder. Giuseppe Pistone died of a heart attack. Sources disagree on the exact date of his death. Some cite 1956, others June 28, 1958, or even 1969. What is certain is that he died in Taubaté. Beneath his pillow, police discovered a photograph, a picture from his wedding to Maria Feia. After 30 years spent trying to brand his wife with the mark of adultery, Pistone still slept with the memory of the woman he had murdered. While the killer tried to rebuild his life, the victim, Maria Feia, was becoming an icon of popular faith. Maria Feia was buried in the Cemetery of Philosophy in the Cebu neighborhood of Santos. Her grave soon became the focus of a kind of religious pilgrimage. Moved by the image of the young immigrant, pregnant, brutally killed, and far from her homeland, people began to venerate her as a saint. She was never canonized by the Catholic Church. In Brazil, the term canonized by culture refers to someone recognized as a saint by the people's faith and devotion, not by Rome. To this day, hundreds of devotees visit her tomb, crediting her with miracles and seeking her intercession, especially in matters of health and protection. For American readers, Maria Feia can be understood as an example of a folk saint, a figure who achieves the status of sanctity through popular devotion rather than ecclesiastical approval. The crime of the trunk was solved thanks to the swift and efficient work of the police. The horror of the discovery, coupled with the cinematic spectacle that followed, amplified by the press, ensured that the case would not only leave its mark on Brazilian criminal history, but also inspire a silent film released that same year, O Crime da Mala, directed by Francisco Madrigano. The macabre trunk itself was preserved and remains on display at the Museum of Crime in São Paulo. The case of Maria Feia illustrates how a single brutal event can expose the underlying tensions of a rapidly changing society. This tragedy unfolded at the crossroads of the immigrant dream, economic deceit, and domestic violence, emerging from a modest apartment to dominate international headlines. The way the victim was treated, dismembered to fit inside a trunk, laid bare the darkest side of the murderer's emotional barrenness. In stark contrast, it also revealed the Brazilian people's deep yearning for justice and their capacity for devotion, which ultimately transformed the victim into a symbol of purity and sanctity. It stands as a grim reminder that even in a society that seemed peaceful, like São Paulo in 1928, tragedy could erupt at any moment, and amid the horror, popular faith would find a new martyr.